I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, what's up, world? Welcome again to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live. I'm Jared Ball. Good morning. Welcome back to Black Power Media, the channel you need in your life for sure. Please make sure you are subscribed and signed up and joined at blackpowermedia.org, Black Power Media 1 on Twitter. That is at Black Power Media, where the 1 replaces the A. It's right down there scrolling at the bottom. If you can join the channel, your membership helps. Of course, we're expanding so much more. Want to broadcast, start getting used to these morning broadcasts, because in a couple of weeks, the Remix Morning Show is going to launch 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. 3 days a week initially, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we'll look to expand beyond that. But this morning I wanted to go over a few things related to an update on the myth of Black buying power, and actually just go over a presentation I just did for students and colleagues at Morgan State, sort of an update on the presentation. And with some news, updating some breaking news regarding an element, an aspect, not an unimportant one at that, related to the myth and propaganda of Black buying power. So if you can grab a couple of people, that is, to join us this morning, please do. If not, they can check the replay. It'll be there. It's all good. Didn't give any notice this morning. I just saw the news, I think late last night, early this morning, and checked the schedule, checked my schedule, and this just seemed the most opportune time. There were a couple people who had asked about the other presentation that was shorter, a little more rushed, and the recording of which I haven't gotten yet. So I'll just do it again here. Take a little more time. Don't have to be rushed. And again, those who can catch it this morning, great, live, that's wonderful. And please engage in the comments if you like. And those who can't, check it later and in fact do the same thing.
Put it in the comments.
So by the way, again, shout out to Pierre and the crew at Comedy Hype. I did just jack that, straight up jacked it. And I keep saying I want to be, I would say maybe I am, and maybe I don't want to be, but maybe I am, and maybe I do want to be the Pierre of Black studies. Or be what Pierre is. I am what Pierre is to comedy. I am to Black radical politics what Pierre is to Black comedy. Anyway, so anyway, yeah, so what I've done is I will show you, we'll go through an update of the presentation, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the new news. Oh, and by the way, at 10 a.m., right. At 10 a.m. this morning, live, Frank Chapman will be here to talk with us about his new book, Black Liberation and Socialism. So you don't want to miss that for sure. So again, this is anyway. All right, so let's see. How can I, because I can't actually, unfortunately, let's see. If I do this, that's too much, I think. If I do it that way, I think that's still going to be too much. Same thing. I think if I actually show it, then I can't. Anyway, let's see what this looks like. Anyway, so yeah, well, let's give this a shot. See if we can do it this way. All right. So again, talking, just updating Actually, since this is, we'll just call it the year anniversary. This is pretty much the year anniversary, coming up on the year anniversary since the book was released, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. So in many ways, this is a good, a good time to do this, a good time to go over this and update this a little bit. So, oh, look at some of the graphics. Yeah, you have to forgive me on some of this too. But anyway, updating the myth. The myth summed up here. Just again, Black America has more than $1.4 trillion in buying power, and that this equates to money which can be used to close persistent gaps in economic or material inequality. That's pretty much how the myth is summarized. That's what it says. And this breaking news this morning actually relates to again, why so many people to this day continue to believe that this myth is in fact real. By the way, please do all that normal stuff. Hit the like button, share button, invite people, all that kind of good stuff too. Anyway. All right, so that's the myth. That's the myth summarized. And as I start in the book, one of the reasons that the myth persists, and again, this was written before, initially at least, this was developed in before I knew the Judas and Black Messiah film was coming out, and this was certainly submitted to the publisher before the film was coming out. But the timing couldn't, in some ways, be better. Given my own criticisms of the film, which obviously you all can check or maybe have already as a several videos, my own, the one with Fred Jr. Please go back and check those for a discussion of that. But what I was arguing here is that one of the reasons why the myth persists is because of the pop cultural representation of the myth. And most recently, in terms of when I was writing the book, was Jay-Z's The Myth of OJ, or not the Myth of OJ, the Story of OJ rhyme, which was touted as, and even presented by, I think, himself and many unwittingly, as some sort of progressive radical message, given specifically the video that presents, sort of a critique of the way Black people have been depicted in cartoons and popular media. But the lyrical messaging is very pro-Black capitalist, pro-economic mythology, with the suggestion that quote unquote financial literacy could be used to improve not only Jay-Z's own position, but as an example for the rest of us. So what I was just trying to point out, as Jay-Z has even made more infamously clear on the Judas soundtrack, with this exaggerated, almost, an exaggerated, disrespectful claim that he is both now Jay-Z and Jeff Fort. I mean, Jay-Z is now Jeff Fort and Fred Hampton, that he is the Messiah. What I was arguing here in the book even takes on, I think, more relevance. And the differences couldn't be made more clear. So as I said here, one has made clear during his multi-decade career that he aspires to the highest of capitalist heights, and the other was disposed of by the U.S. federal government, in part for aggressively espousing the redistributionist politics of socialism. So the fact that Hampton was assassinated, as was Mark Clark, on the day Jay-Z was born, I think has a lot to do, or at least for us, has a lot to about the contradictions and the pop cultural representation of these kinds of politics, and the way they end up being stripped of any meaning and used ultimately against us. Another reason why the myth persists is, even before the contemporary media environment hyper weaponization of the myth, is that for a long time across the Black political spectrum, it has been adopted or adapted, misunderstood, and perhaps in some cases even intentionally abused. But this leads to so much of the confusion that we still suffer. that continues to confuse. Or again, as Fred Hampton used to say, leads to conclusions that don't conclude, and questions that don't, answers that don't answer, and conclusions that don't conclude. So as I keep trying to point out, while the men depicted here represent a broad range of Black radical politics, or Black conservative politics even, and where some of them I am enamored by and thoroughly support, and others I in fact frankly despise and thoroughly disagree with. None of that for our purposes is relevant. What is relevant is that everyone from Marcus Garvey to Boyce Watkins has again adopted or adapted a version of this myth, which has made it that much more difficult. And again, I've laughed about it over the years and I understand that when I walk into a room, when Jared Paul walks into a room and says that all of these men and others are on this issue alone. I'm not talking about the rest of their politics or philosophies. On this issue alone are wrong. I get why people resist that. And I get again why it's but as I try to lay out in the book and I think doing a well enough job in summary, this is it is understandable how these and others would have misunderstood the initial claims or the initial reporting and rebranded or adapted it to their own ideas, and why, even as they would have indirectly sort of moved on from that in some cases, that lingers, the idea of buying power and this economic strength, quote unquote, exists. So anyway, so again, Garvey said that the only thing he and Du Bois agreed about at one point was that there is this buying power which represents the true strength of Black people. Certainly Booker T. Washington and the I think was it the Negro Business Leagues that he supported and developed, bought into it. Dr. King to a lesser extent and was certainly critical of it, and we'll come back to this again. And he is also misunderstood in this. Malcolm X at the time promoted it. Certainly Minister Farrakhan to this day does. Claude Anderson certainly to this day does. And Boyce Watkins certainly to this day does as well, which again continues to add to, again, the confusion on this issue. Most famously, and in many ways, to a certain extent, most controversially, the late, great Dr. Amos Wilson is probably at this point the primary progenitor of this myth. And again, this is not to say that Dr. Wilson was wrong in other areas. This is not to say that, again, that he was intentionally mistaken. Again, this is not a comment on anything else about him or his work. It is just to say that on this one issue, he was mistaken. And because of his prominence, his justifiable prominence in particularly Black radical circles and grassroots nationalist circles, and his influence on a punditry and journalist class, it has, and the specifically this book, the Blueprint for Black Power, which to this day is used by a good many as a core text, if not sort of a biblical kind of text. It adds to the strength of the myth because, as he said here, the Selig Center study demonstrates the growing importance of Black consumers whose spending can make the difference between business success and failure, end quote. Now, this is important because the Blueprint for Black Power was published just after the Selig Center and Jeffrey Humphreys started publishing what are now the contemporary and driving force reports, the buying power reports that produce and in the last at least 25, 30, 40 years or so, well, whatever the math is on that, I guess that's since 1994, have been driving this mythology. And it's important to note again that not only does the Selig Center figure prominently and show up, in highlighted form in Dr. Wilson's work, it is again to this day the singular and only source for claims of this buying power. To this day, there are no other sources, and again, we'll come back to that make this that are referenced for claims of buying power or that 1 point whatever trillion dollar number. So that's important that it again comes out at this time with Jeffrey Humphreys, and that it is picked up by Dr. Wilson, because in terms of Black America, this is what helps propel the misunderstanding. Oh, wrong one. Okay. So the flip side of this, and I've described him here as the myth's lone resistor, is that the only prominent figure in Black history that I've found who specifically spoke to the inaccuracy of this claim is George Jackson. And I think, without going into too much else about that right now, that there is a reason why George is one of the few, if not the only, that I've identified to be specifically correct on this issue. And it is another reason why I think his analysis is as close to perfection as it gets, and why so much of his work is suppressed to this day. But as he said here, so what is to be done after a revolution has failed, after our enemies have created a conservative mass society based on meaningless electoral politics, spectator sports, and a 3% annual rise in purchasing power strictly regulated to negate itself with a corresponding rise in the cost of living, end quote. Again, a quote as prescient and relevant for what is happening right now, today, as ever. But again, speaks specifically to the correctness and in interpreting the fallacy of the myth. Because in its origins, the myth is about managing labor, and specifically labor unrest. So, as I outlined in the book, the myth originates in cost of living surveys developed within the Bureau of Labor Statistics beginning in the late 19th century. And while the concept of buying power predates this is, as far as I'm aware, the origins of the specific category, the specific government and business mechanism or tool to measure, to properly, I should say, calibrate the amount people are paid so as to allow them to be able to earn enough to buy the products that they're helping produce, and not rebel. Excuse me just one quick second. Sorry about that. Because at the turn of the century, as the 20th century came about, a more organized labor group, a more organized body of working people that existed then than today, realized that, and as I show a little bit in the book, they say, look, we're helping produce all this wealth, we're producing all this products, and we're realizing that we're not making any more money, or in the money that we are earning has no more strength in the economy, in the marketplace than before. Here come the strikes, here comes the social unrest. So to, again, calibrate that, which is something that is of great concern today. The biggest difference, as I'll come back to, is the level and the sophistication of the propaganda. The response was, well, from the elite, well, hey, we better calibrate this better. We better bring this in. We better reconcile this. So pay them a little bit more and get them back to spending and get them back to calming down. And if we have to make slightly less, so be it, because in the end, it makes it easier to facilitate the exploitation. Then the other part of the purpose of the concept of buying power was to help corporations, and this is something that would slowly emerge in the 20th century. It was to help corporations, companies wanting to spend ad revenue, direct where they would spend it and how they would spend it and how they would target it. So again, from its origins and today, the purpose of the buying power concept was not to assess the economic condition of any group, particularly Black people, and was only developed to help the elite manage and keep sort of in line how much they're paying their workers, so as to not pay them too much that they don't need the job, but pay them enough that they don't rebel. And then to help direct the ad revenue. If you're spending money on ads, you don't want to just put it in any magazine, in any newspaper, in any publication, on any outlet. You want to get more sophisticated. If I'm targeting Black women, where do Black women go for their media? Where do young Black women go? Where do older Black women go? Where do older Black women go with certain levels of income? I want to put my ads there. Certainly that was done. That is done for every segment of society. So that's what the purpose was. Not to assess the conditions of those people economically, but to find out how better to get them to spend whatever money they do have on the ads being purchased by the purchasers. Do you actually? You all don't hear that, do you? Yeah, no, I didn't think so. You all don't hear that, do you? Okay. All right. That is Sinclair Weeks, who at the time of this video that I'll come back to was the Secretary of Commerce. And that video is the video Selling the Negro, created by John H. Johnson, founder of Ebony and Jet. And in 1954, this is where I argue the concept of buying power became weaponized as it relates to Black people, because this is the post Second World War moment, where the United States, having solidified itself as a singular hegemon, which, by the way, is drastically changing. We all might, start paying, if we haven't already. We are late to it. Get caught up on your Chinese history, languages, and yeah. Anyway, but after the Second World War, the U.S. was the dominant superpower, and had begun to increase what it had already developed, going back several decades, an increasingly sophisticated and weaponized system of psychological warfare, euphemized as propaganda or public relations. Today is advertising, branding, marketing, strategic communication, mass communication. These are all euphemisms, literally, for psychological warfare, ideological warfare, worldview warfare, manipulation, public opinion, managing public opinion, manufacturing consent, all of those phrases. That is what all of this was meant to do. And in after the Second World War, those in power here in the United States said, well, this is the time. We're going to promote the United States as open, as free, as democratic, and we're going to wed concepts of democracy to capitalism and freedom, to capitalism and freedom, democracy and capitalism as interlocked. This is obviously this is the time of Edward Bernays. This is the time of Ivy Lee. This is the time. This is when all of this is, and the idea again that to close the gap between material reality and claims about what this country can be, more propaganda was going to be used. John H. Johnson, understanding the moment to a certain extent, wanted to capture for himself and those of his business class or the black bourgeoisie the increasing ad revenue that was being spent and targeted towards black consumers, or was possible or could potentially be targeted towards black consumers. The elite, those in power, the federal government, wanted to project an image of black upward mobility into middle-class capitalist fantasy. So there was a sort of coming together of goals in this instance, that the United States, both domestically and abroad, wanted to project this country as open and having the possibility for there to be, even for its formerly enslaved, even for those currently being Jim and Jane Crowed and all of those other things, there was this opportunity for black people to expand and to oh, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to see if I could, can I play it so I don't hear it? Yeah, let me do that so that you can at least see this video. I'll come back to it in just a second. While it's running, at least see some of it. It's on YouTube. If you haven't seen it already, it's easily available. In my book, I point to some sources that talk a little bit more about the history of John H. Johnson, certainly Brother Jonathan Fenderson's work. Let's see. And others who talk about some of the history of this video, but you can see that, let's see here, that, anyway, so what the corporate and political elite want is this, again, projection of, in this case, black upward mobility, black people not as wanting civil rights and liberation, but wanting just simply to become middle-class citizens, good consumers, to have that the picket fence and all those other, mythological fantasies. And of course, what John H. Johnson and his crew wanted was to capture that ad revenue, to get all of the what are now upwards of $500 billion in ad revenue spent every year. So for a black commercial press publication, a black commercial media outlet, this is essential. The more of that you can capture, the better. And essential to capturing that is to be able to convince. And this is where here you see the $15 billion figure come up. That was what black people were earning collectively. So what is being presented here in this video is a buying power of $15 billion, which is just as this case is today, suggests that if Black people spend literally every penny and more than they actually earn, this suggests an economic strength. But the strength being defined is a strength to enrich corporations, to turn your money over to corporations. So again, as you see here, and as a former sailor, we used to joke about this all the time. It is amazing how often Navy symbolism pops up in pop culture over the years. So it's funny to see that little boy wearing a Navy outfit as they again try to promote this Black middle class family that just wants to listen to records and watch TV and play cowboys and Indians and buy refrigerators. And this is what John H. Johnson, Black women going to the grocery store, this is what John H. Johnson was trying to say, so that the white people that own all of those products would spend money in his publications advertising those products. So that's what this video does. So this is, and then through his publications, the promotion of this unreality is where, for Black consumers, for Black communities, this myth becomes heightened and further weaponized. All right. Adding to the weaponization, of course, is so John H. Johnson, for me and for my book and for this sort of the summary of this argument, represents one major turning point. Another is a couple decades later with the Nixon administration in the late 60s, early 70s, further weaponizing the concept of buying power, particularly as a tool within the broader weapon or tactic of claiming Black capitalism, which, as you can see here in this central piece of propaganda, this what's the word I'm looking for? Promotional flyer or whatever. He says, literally, it says, this time vote like Homer Pitts did. This time vote like Homer Pitts' whole world depended on it. He'll get his degree. Then what? Laborer, factory job, or his own business? A vote for Richard Nixon for president is a vote for a man who wants Homer to have the chance to own his own business. Richard Nixon believes strongly in Black capitalism because Black capitalism is Black power in the best sense of the word. It is the road that leads to Black economic influence and Black pride. It is the key to the Black man's fight for equality, for a piece of the action, and that's what the free enterprise system is all about. Nixon was weaponizing the concept of Black capitalism, literally, as he says here, to redefine it to redefine Black power away from Kwame Ture, radical redistribution, militant, politics and movements, Pan-Africanism, radical revolutionary nationalism. None of those, that's not Black power. Black power is Black business, Black politicians, Black capitalism. This is the blueprint still used to this day. Literally this year in 2021, this is part of the as I talked about in a previous video where my work was co-opted by the Urban League in an appeal to get the federal government to support and infuse cash into Black businesses. The Urban League rebranded my argument about buying power. The Urban League, who have helped produce and promote the myth of buying power, rebrand my argument, just as Nixon was trying to do here with Black power, to say it is Black businesses, it is Black capitalism that represents the Black man's fight for equality, for a piece of the action. The use of Black celebrity, O.J. Simpson, the Hertz car commercial, all of this was all part of a promotional campaign to get Black people away from even if you look at what I still think is the best commercial media product on the history of race, class, and media in this country, the OJ Made in America by Brother Edelman. That if you watch if you watch that documentary, and particularly the part where they talk about the making of that O.J. Simpson Hertz commercial, they outline all of this. They lay all of this out, promoting as they say in the clip, their kind of African. They literally say that. I think it's the director that says OJ's this black, this beautiful African, something to that effect. But using him not to sell cars, but to sell the idea that black capitalism, that black participation, that is the way to go. Not civil rights, not black militancy, not a black liberation movement. Go into black capitalism. All of that was weaponized and very well described in that documentary. But this was the context, and this is the blueprint still used literally to this day, as I'm going to show you again in a few minutes. So the modern purveyors, again, as I was saying, going back, and again, it's the paradox that Dr. Amos Wilson, in his dogged, tireless search for ways to find an avenue out of this mess for his community. It is the paradox here that he comes across this information that is just misinterpreted. It's misread. Because the Selig Center, working with Nielsen, are the modern purveyors of the mythology, and in such a way that, again, continues to confuse and confound so many on this issue, and I think by extrapolation others, in terms of understanding the economy, understanding our relationship to the society, what is the role of the economy, what is the role of black people in this economy. All of that is misunderstood. So as these Nielsen reports and the Selig reports say, in their actually, I think this is, no, I think this is the multicultural economy report. This is the Selig report, where it says here, we have helped create conscious consumers. Nielsen says the same thing, by the way, who are aware now more than ever how their economic power has a direct impact on the marketplace overall. And the reason I put that there is because this is another one of the examples that show how or what the purpose of the actual purpose and function of these reports and studies. Conscious consumers, as I outline in the book, is a concept developed by National Public Radio, Nielsen, Selig, that is meant to play on this idea of black consciousness. It is not about a black radical consciousness. It's about saying, they literally talk about this. Black people want to express themselves. They want to support their communities. So this is how you market to that. That's the purpose. Oh, I keep doing that. All right. And this, oh no, that's not okay. I was going to say that would have been perfect. This from one of the more recent Nielsen reports, saying here that they're working with the NNPA, that is the National Newspaper Publishing Association, the largest collective of black commercial press outlets. It says here, we are proud that the combined Nielsen and NNPA resources have galvanized corporations and consumers alike to think and behave differently toward valuing the African-American consumer and their economic impact on the marketplace. So in both of these quotes, what I'm trying to show is what from Selig and the NNPA and Nielsen, what they're saying is these reports are to help corporations reach the consumers they want to reach, And when it says here to get them to understand or behave differently towards valuing the African American consumer, what the NNPA is trying to say here is the reason they're involved in this is because, and as they talk about it, as I show in the book, as they say in their own reports, they are trying to hold white corporate America to account, to say, we know you're spending this $500 billion every year on ads. We want our cut. You need to value our consumers more. So we're going to produce these reports to show you how valuable our consumers are. And to do that, we're going to tell you, and we're going to support the people who tell you that we are spending $1.4 trillion every year. Because if you know we're spending that kind of money, you will spend more on buying ads in our commercial media outlets. So again, it's about wedding corporations to consumers. It's about wedding corporate ad buyers to commercial black and white, but in this case, black presses. And ultimately, as both of these last quotes have shown, it's about measuring or recognizing the impact on the U.S. marketplace. Because as I'll come back to, it has been long understood, and this is a crisis that is been exacerbated since the COVID crisis, that when black economic inequality has gotten to the point where black people cannot properly support the broader economy. And by supporting of the broader economy, that is recognizing their impact on the U.S. marketplace, they're saying the overall gross domestic product, that is the overall value of all the goods and services purchased and traded or sold in the course of a year, goes down. That when black people are not out here spending and buying and just shopping and performing their role, as is the role for everyone in this consumer-based economy, which is 70% consumer-based economy, then the overall GDP goes down. And that means the owners, that is the white corporations, lose money. So going back again to the beginning of the buying power concept, the entire point here is to keep people spending in the economy and enriching the owners of the economy without them feeling the levels of exploitation to the point that they rebel. It is not an assessment of income. It is not an assessment of wealth. It is not an assessment, in this case or any other, of black or any other group's economic strength or condition. So another reason why this continues to be confusing is, again, because not only is the commercial black press helping to produce and promote these reports, but they are literally misreporting the reports that they are helping to create and propagate. That is, everybody who is in the process of producing these reports, the black commercial presses, the white corporations, they all understand that the purpose here is to bring money from white corporations to the in this case, black commercial presses, who have to convince white corporations that they can sell them a black audience. If you give me your ad revenue, I will sell you a black audience who can in fact afford to buy your products. So this is why over here on the right, you see from advertising age, I guess one of the leading industry, marketing industry, advertising industry, trade publications. And it's probably over this now by 2021, but the forecast was that there was going to be almost $500 billion spent in marketing in 2019, up 3.5% from the year before. And this quote on the left comes from Roland Martin's Unfiltered. So it's Roland Martin. This is not personal. This is just about how this works, given his importance to the black political public sphere and a commercial press outlet. As he says, the only daily, I think, as he says it, the only daily black news program. At the bottom of the page, it says, quote, all of this presents a unique opportunity to bring the African-American community, which according to Nielsen wields $1.3 trillion in spending power, a daily news program that disseminates information ignored by mainstream media and brings diverse perspectives to a media landscape that largely marginalizes them. All of that is code language for, if you white corporations spend money on me, I will sell you and deliver you a black audience who can in fact afford to buy your products. And the hustle here, and this is where the black community and the black commercial press world have to have the come to Jesus moment and reckoning. Whatever our political positions are, this kind of relationship has to be, I think, more exposed and better dealt with. And by that I mean, if the commercial black press, on the one hand, we understand there is a need to generate revenue. We understand that there is a business model that exists. But on the one hand, there has to be an ability for black commercial outlets to convince white corporations to spend money on them without falsely reporting economic mythology to their black audiences. Because the way it gets reported, as I talk throughout the book about, is not that these buying power figures are marketing tools help to bring ad revenue to black commercial press outlets. That's not how it's reported. It's reported as, variations of, this is our economic strength. This is what we can do if we were more financially literate. If we spent better, we can invest in business. We could we could do that. That's all nonsense. And it all emanates, and as I show in the book, one of these press outlets, I forget which one, I want to say it's the Washington Informer, but one of these press outlets that had interviewed me for this, where I had explained to them how they not only falsely reported the concept, but then falsely reported our interview. They removed our entire interview, was scrubbed from their entire publication. But that same reporter comes right back a few years later to continue falsely reporting the myth. And falsely reporting the myth as, this is black people's ability. This money represents a possibility for black people to overturn economic inequality if they were better business people, more financially literate, if they supported one another better. And again, that's not how any of this works. So this brings us to the news of the day, so to speak. It's even been more updated since this, where I found it interesting that, as it says here, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference plans protest outside Nielsen headquarters during Black History Month. And this is in reference to Cheryl Grace, formerly known as Cheryl McNeil-Pearson, who was the head of, and in fact, here I think I'll exit out of this so that I can show you this updated news. Because you can see here how Nielsen settles federal lawsuit by executive who alleged racism blocked promotions. The Atlanta-based Southern Christian Leadership Conference had targeted Nielsen in a series of protests planned as part of a year-long campaign against corporate racism. This came out just 2 days ago, March 21st, 2021. This is a picture here of Cheryl Grace, again, formerly known as Cheryl McNeil-Pearson. In fact, when you read my book, her name was still at that time McNeil-Pearson, but this is the same woman. It says here, Nielsen has settled a federal discrimination lawsuit by a Chicago-based black female executive who had accused the company of racism, according to a civil rights group that had launched protests against the data tracking firm. The agreement with Cheryl Grace, Nielsen's former senior vice president of U.S. Strategic Community Alliance and Consumer Engagement, bans both sides from disclosing its terms. The Atlanta-based Southern Christian Leadership Conference, co-founded by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King, it doesn't say Jr., but had targeted, was it senior? No, anyway, had targeted Nielsen in a series of protests planned as part of a year-long campaign against corporate racism. The organization accused Nielsen of racial bias in promotion and retention of executives of color based on allegations in Grace's blockbuster October lawsuit. Nielsen tracks and sells information on consumer habits. That's a very important Nielsen tracks and sells information on consumer habits because, again, they're selling that information to corporations who are looking to spend their ad revenue in very targeted ways. Grace has been credited with founding Nielsen's high-profile annual reports highlighting the buying power of Blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, becoming the national face of the firm in multicultural consumer relations. So I admit some Schadenfreude. I admit whatever in when I first saw this story last year and in following it, that, I mean, a woman, and I'm going to show you the portion just a moment of my book where we had our sort of indirect exchange. But what I'm getting at is that this woman whose career, most recently at least, was founding Nielsen's high-profile annual reports highlighting the buying power of Blacks. This is a woman who has been taking the Selig reports, because all of her reports reference only the Selig Center study reports for the buying power claim. And as I go through in the book, the Selig reports themselves are woefully flawed, and admit that they are, quote, estimates, quote, projections, that they cannot determine the actual spending power of African Americans or any other group, and their model or method is never explained. And as I explain more fully in detail in the book, I show you how they claim that they're doing it and why that's just not accurate. But anyway, but the point here is that Grace takes those reports, packages them as Nielsen reports to highlight the buying power of Blacks, and then ends up quitting and suing Nielsen for racism and blocking her advance in her own increased. So it's kind of funny because part of what her claim was that, and I know the details aren't listed here, but part of her claim was that, and somewhere in here they even say again that Grace's lawsuit alleged racial bias in the C-suite had blocked her efforts to climb the ranks despite consistently high performance. And she alleged that after sharing concerns with Nielsen CEO and Chief Diversity Officer David Kenny, she was marginalized and subjected to a hostile work environment. So it's funny because a woman who's promoting the buying power, the mythology of a buying power and an economic strength among Black Americans, is living out, even in the highest levels of corporate America, she is living out one aspect of why buying power is in fact mythology. The fact that even a well-paid, highly placed executive who is a Black woman would still find her advancement blocked and curtailed and eventually forced out because of racism speaks to why this idea that Black people can overcome inequality, systemic, centuries-long inequality, through simple financial literacy and business practice. That as I talk a little bit about in the book, the very value of what Black people do is devalued by the simple fact of their Blackness. So it is that much more. But again, specific to the point here, the presentation here is that, and I'm going to come back to it, is that the very people who should know better, the very people who do know better, the very people who have the attention of the Black community as an audience are promoting the mythologies themselves, consciously or not. Going back to some of the prominent figures I mentioned earlier, consciously or not, that's for others to determine. The point remains that the projection, the disseminated information and the interpretation of that information is entirely false. So coming again, I couldn't put these images in the book for copyright issues, but I do talk about them because this is part of what, again, continues to confound and confuse. Here, radical Black imagery, fists up, defiant Blackness, beautiful imagery is presented via Black Lives Matter and a Black-owned bank. In their own materials, claiming that the use of this Visa debit card in connection with a Black-owned bank is going to somehow marshal the buying power of Black people into an improved economic reality. And when led by very powerful spokespeople from Black Lives Matter and couched in the hashtag and in the symbolism, it continues to confuse and make it harder for people to realize what is being said and the history of why it's being said, or its function as psychological warfare, which is again meant to walk Black people away from what is our own, and I'll conclude there in a moment, but our own, only, real power, which is organizational, political power, social movement, to assume political power, is redefined as banking Black, as something symbolic, as participating in the capitalist endeavor. So the same thing here with this other one, draping, dripping in African and Black womanhood and Kemetic symbolism and, all this, beautiful symbolism. But the claim is that a historic partnership has been born between one United Bank, the largest Black-owned bank in the country, and Black Lives Matter to organize the $1.2 trillion in spending power of Black America. Again, this suggests that this money exists and that it's because Black people are ignorant and disorganized that Black economic inequality exists, and that if you organize, if you again, as it says here, if you organize your 1.2 trillion in spending power via a Visa debit card and a Black-owned bank, you can, the suffering you continue to endure and complain about will, if not fully go away, certainly be lessened. And that's just simple fallacy. That's just long disproven fallacy. So just sort of wrapping up, what I'm continuing to argue, and I think, my book, I'd like to even update what my book argues as a solution, which are practical, non-revolutionary, base, I think, platform planks for any political movement. We need to focus on either the gross domestic product, which is, again, as I said a moment ago, the total value of all the goods and services spent, sold, traded in a given year, which is really the measurement of those who own the economy, the wealth generated for those who own the economy. And before the COVID crisis, we're talking about $20 trillion. If that's redistributed through public policy, then there's no need for all, then there would be no need for Black people to be told or concerned about improving their economic condition through small businesses and banking Black and being more responsible with their spending, because in fact it is that spending, as I pointed out to and describe in the book, that helps drive the GDP. And I point out in the book itself that there was already a pre-COVID concern with Black inequality getting to the point where Black people were not able to spend all of that whatever is earned back into the economy that they don't own. So I think an even better solution than what I came up with for the book is, as economists Michael Hudson and Steve Grumbine and others have been arguing, and many others probably much longer, I'm just focused on them most recently, is what they call a debt jubilee. That is total debt cancellation. Every debt should be canceled. And why do I think, and I think they're right in making this point, that this is better? Because it doesn't, getting money, getting a check, getting cash infusions, getting stimulus, even a higher minimum wage, all of which should happen, but none of that will change the fundamental condition of anybody or their relationship to the economy if their debt still exists. all this stimulus does, all these cash infusions do, even if it had been done better as has been done elsewhere in the world with monthly checks of $1,400 to $2,000, even that would not change the relationship that we have to this society or its economy. A debt cancellation project would, because if you don't, if all you earn is 50, it doesn't matter what you earn or how much money you have. If you don't owe any money, then what you earn and have takes on a whole new level of value. If you just get an increased wage, if you just get a stimulus check or stimulus checks, or what all these other little things that are being presented as massive game changers, it doesn't change anything, because you still owe the money on your house, on your student debt, on your car, on your credit card, on your phone, on whatever else, the home repair, whatever else. Wipe that out. And even if you don't get the level of income or checks that you should get, your life changes immediately and for real. And that is a practical, again, non-revolutionary solution that I think we should make as a basic platform plank going forward. I think we should start now in terms of how we engage electoral politics. If that's a plan, that nobody gets a vote, I don't care what party they are. If your platform doesn't have at its top a debt jubilee, don't vote for them. That would be my suggestion, at least, or part of my non-revolutionary, overt solutions. All right, so that I'm going to stop there. Thank you all again for checking that out. I will, let me go back and I'll check if there are any comments or questions or responses or critiques, whatever. But I did want to just go through some of that again. Again, the book came out about a year ago, and it's still free as a response to the uprisings last summer. So you can go to imixwhatilike.org and just get your free copy, your free digital copy, and let me know what you think. But I think that we do have to definitely get. Yeah, good morning. What's up? What's up? No, not sleep. Been up for hours. Actually. Let's see. Yeah. And it's the same thing, by the way, whether it's Killer Mike's argument for a bank. I see, there's renewed interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and whatnot, but all of them, except sort of the base logic that I'm trying to get us to separate from. That is that whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's black banking, whether it's all of these are arguments that some sort of, again, financial literacy, some sort of engagement in currency or financially or is the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is public policy. The issue is setting policy that assures that whatever the societal arrangement is, whatever the societal economic relationship is, the wealth that society generates is distributed so that nobody is suffering. Then we can get to next levels of how is wealth being generated and change that. But the first thing should be, we're already generating $20 trillion in wealth, redistribute it. Bitcoin, it's the same. I mean, the issue of it not being tied to state or government, I don't think is a benefit, by the way, necessarily, because I think, as Richard Wolff pointed out, somebody sent me this thing on Twitter. I thanked them for it, but where Richard Wolff, the economist, is explaining his response to Bitcoin, and he's saying, more or less, the goal shouldn't be to disassociate currency from regulation, as is the argument with Bitcoin, like break free from governments. That's not what we want. The point is, because again, all of that is walking us away from assuming political power. We want political power. We should want political power. I don't want my material condition to be left to the vagaries and the day-to-day feelings of whoever has the most Bitcoin. So I think that whole thing is total mythology too. So yeah, we need, please definitely hit the like button, hit the share button, join the channel if you can. We are expanding, and again, we are redistributing the revenue we generate. This puts the COVID relief stimulus checks as spending strategy into new context for me. It's not help for people, but to redistribute away from. That's exactly it. The stimulus checks are only, so it's like sort of cover in the book, and this is the point I'm getting at, that the elite understand and have always understood, if poor people are not consuming and not spending, then the people who own the products and the mechanisms that produce the products that they're spending on don't make money. So they either have to create money out of nothing, as they did last summer, to give to themselves with the Care and Relief Act, or they have to find ways to stimulate people to go back to spending to get people to continue to enrich those who own the economy. So it doesn't change our relationship to the economy. It will obviously look, and look, I recognize the relative position of privilege I'm speaking from. So I'm not talking about, I get it. There are people that need immediately something. They need some money right now to put something in the refrigerator, to turn the lights on, to get the heat on, whatever they need, whatever. I get that. And that should happen. But as I say to students in the classroom, I'll say to us here, in this moment, we all sort of have the relative privilege to step away and develop an analysis. And that is important. We can't constantly be, trying to figure things out while fighting in the trenches. At some point, we do have to be able to step back. And this is what the attempt here is to say, once we can have a moment to stop swinging and step back for a second, we can see this is not done to help anybody. This check that has been sent to me or to whoever isn't going to help me, not in terms of my overall relationship to this economy. It's going to help me survive and participate and maintain the economy and my relationship to it. The propaganda pushing Kanye West being the richest black man in U.S. history. And again, so what? Even if that's true, so what? All right. I was a little nervous about this presentation, not because I believe the myth, but was unsure how this argument would be constructed and how it would be supported and analyzed. Well, it's not necessarily well supported in that, but the juxtaposition of the tension between black organization, black capitalism framework that I didn't realize were in relations function is managing populations. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, I'm continuing, and eventually I hope to get to him, but I'm going to eventually try to do my own work around it if I can't. The book Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine. Oh, by the way, I did forget. You know what? Let me show you some, because then I can show you that because that I forgot to show you the part in the. So in my book here, you can see where she was still named Cheryl Pearson McNeil, but we actually were on tape separately and not aired. I think. I mean, we weren't on air at the same time. We were taped separately, but we were sort of edited into. Public Radio International, I think, or Marketplace, or one of those public radio episodes a couple of years ago. In 2014, I believe, because let me my bad. Let me take down. Sorry about that. Because let's see, full screen. Does that help make it a little bit better? Um, And then I noticed, yeah, so in 2014, right, National Public Radio's Marketplace contacted me to discuss buying power. As happened before and since with various media outlets, I was initially invited to give a pre-recorded interview about Black buying power, but was not told of any other guests or what they might say. As it turned out, my comments were cut short and more time was made for Cheryl Pearson McNeil, a senior vice president at Nielsen, who was there to talk about their own report. For McNeil, buying power meant an odd mixture of reality and myth. That is, on one hand, she was right when claiming buying power is evidenced in the appearance of more Black people in commercials. This, of course, is where the myth of buying power originates, in advertising and marketing campaigns targeting Black consumers to transfer their dollars to sellers, owners, and producers of those goods and services, some Black but mostly white companies. But McNeil also, on the other hand, took up the mythic or fallacious side as well in arguing that these overtures by white companies in advertising to Black consumers was an extension of the boycott, sit-ins, and other general work of those like Dr. King. The interview was taped in February, after all. Hers was a continuation of a tradition or pattern of having commercial firms or definitions of buying power be those that supplant historic or contemporary critique. McNeil, of course, did not discuss Dr. King's increasing radicalism, frustration with the lack of progress of boycotts and nonviolent protest, or his evolving preference for socialism, or at minimum, massive government intervention in the redistribution of wealth. McNeil did not raise King's own published and previously mentioned a critique of buying power, or his clear condemnation of consumerism as a pathway to equality. This demonstrates the power of propaganda and the myth's propulsion via both the myth's creators and commercial media, and the myth's more easily, broadly digestible inherent politics. So again, that's why I think it was Schadenfreude-esque, so to speak, to see McNeil then turn around to sue Nielsen for racism, while misreporting both the economic reality and the historical facts about Dr. King, boycotts, etc., and while perpetuating and continuing to confuse Black and other audiences. So, I mean, this is anyway. But the reason I wanted to show that most immediately, because I just wanted to quickly show you the cover of this book again that I want to strongly recommend, and that I want to eventually I want to get to do some serious discussion about with others, with whoever, I don't, on some level, because what I'm really getting at here is that what Levine lays out, more than I had ever seen and certainly paid attention to, is, as I've pointed out, there are the military origins of our media environment. But what he talks about is the specific need from the beginning, from before the beginning. He details how those in power were developing our media environment for the specific purpose of suppressing counterinsurgency, not advertising, not propagating young white boys to go to war, not making money, not selling cars, not even selling American patriotism. The primary number one, and he documents this thoroughly. He even shows, my favorite quick point on this to tell people, he even shows how Charles Murray, the author of The Bell Curve, who in the 90s created so much conversation and just noise around Black inherent inequality and inferiority, rather, had himself been born career-wise out of this very history of military propaganda, counterinsurgency, psychological warfare, developed initially, for Murray at least, in Southeast Asia, brought home directly to target Black people with the same tactics. So what I'm getting at is, consciously or not, wittingly or not, our media environment is set the condition for people, for news, for versions of the world that operate and impact us as would psychological warfare operations. So the confusion, the misrepresentation, the outright lies and false representation of fact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whether done by accident, whether done whatever, is occurring within a digital and media environment 60 plus years ago, understood by those who would develop it, would be designed to create a context such as this. They desire to create this context, is really what I'm getting at. So yeah, I mean, this is sort of the point, Marion, that they start yapping about buying power, but they can't point to their sources. But if you notice, and this was one of the first things I started to realize more than a decade now ago when I started looking at this, is that when you do look at the sources, they all point to the exact same one, and it comes from the Selig Center. So that's why, going back a few minutes, that's why I'm saying that when Amos Wilson picks up on it, again, I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm saying the impact has been, and this is sort of my point. This is actually a better way of putting it. The environment I'm just describing, that Levine has described, sets the context so that even someone like Amos Wilson, trying to do his best to intellectually contribute to the liberation of his people, is accidentally, honestly, unwittingly caught up in a context designed specifically for psychological warfare. And I want to continue to use that phrase even more than I should have long ago been using it more and more and more. We got to stop even using propaganda. This is not public relations. This is not marketing. This is not advertising. This is not opinions of news. This is not perspectives. This is not entertainment for sure. This is psychological warfare. And in fact, I think I was showing this to another class, to a class rather, but I'll just show it here quickly, because in one of Nancy Snow's great works on propaganda, in this chapter here, Garth Jowett has a whole chapter on propaganda as entertainment that I would encourage. It's in a book called Propaganda in American Democracy, edited by Nancy Snow. But it's this chapter is the one I would maybe the first one I would point to get people to realize that, as is written here, there's no such thing as value-free content in entertainment, and that all content has meaning for the audience. Literally every form of entertainment can be considered to fall under the definition of propaganda. And by extension, what I'm saying, propaganda is psychological warfare, because it's just, as it says here, the deliberate, systematic attempt to shape perceptions, manipulate cognitions, and direct behavior to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the propagandist. So I'm trying to propagandize you, my audience. We're engaged in positive propaganda on Black Power Media, just acknowledging it. But when applied in a colonial context with the kind of unequal power relationships that we're talking about here, and by design, and is specifically applied or adapted to the state project, the U.S. military project of protecting its own settler colonial existence, we have to understand that even especially when we like what we're getting, entertainment wise, media wise, that is psychological warfare. That is the context itself, especially after you get to the Levine. Oh man, now for me, it's a wrap now. I thought I was where I was when. Now after this Levine book, it is a total entire wrap. We can disagree about its impact or its success, however you want, but intent, we have to understand is clear. This is not about entertaining. This is not about selling anything either. This is about psychological warfare. So now, specific to the argument of buying power, I'm not saying that Cheryl Grace or others are saying I'm engaged. What I'm saying is the context has been set so that, again, Cheryl Grace coming from a more conservative Black business perspective, Dr. Amos Wilson coming from a revolutionary nationalist perspective, all those other men that I pointed out before coming from their various perspectives, all can be at various times caught up by this myth, in part because the media environment from even before, well, at least in terms of Malcolm and Dr. King, was designed specifically to do this. I guess to their credit or benefit, people like Garvey and Du Bois and Booker T missed the initial development of this modern media system. But as Du Bois, as they already understood, it was already a highly propagated environment, and why they were doing all their media work anyway. So, but this version, isn't that 1.4 trillion just the amount of money that Black people make per year before rent, mortgages, bills? Yeah, more or less. And I try to calculate that too. More or less, yes. That's it. And going back to the and by the way, shout out to Lenny Bruce in your picture there. Lenny Bruce was a revered, highly venerated figure in my household growing up. So shout out to Lenny Bruce. But yeah, even if you go back to that video selling Negro with the $15 billion figure initially, what they tied it to income. They were saying, so they were very clear, because initially, again, buying power is a measurement. It comes out of, as I talk about in the book, cost of living surveys. So they're just assessing how much are people earning, and then how much can they spend. And if you want, and if the goal is to convince ad buyers. So on the one hand, if you're the federal government in the 1950s and you want to convince the world that Black people are coming up, you want a bigger figure. So if Black people are collectively earning 15 billion, that's buying power. You say that number and everybody goes, ooh. By now, same thing. If it's over $1 trillion, big number, big headline. Ooh, sounds, so run with that. And because if you're trying to convince the world that Black people are doing better under American capitalism, then the bigger number helps. If you're trying to, as a Black commercial press outlet, convince white ad buyers that your audience, that your audience that you're intending to sell to them can buy their products, then of course you will also want to project a bigger number. The problem then becomes that ad revenue relationship gets reported falsely in those same press outlets as an economic strength that Black consumers are just foolishly squandering. And that's where it becomes the psychological, or more of the psychological weapon against Black people. And no other group, by the way. As I talk about, every group has its buying power assessed. Every single solitary segment of society, municipalities, the federal government. But only when it comes to Black people is this turned into a mechanism to walk us away from political organizing and movement building, and into these blind, empty, again, as Fred Hampton said, these conclusions that don't conclude and answers that don't answer, like Black capitalism, like voting for the Democratic Party, lesser of evil, like set up another Black business, all of these things. Again, Operation Mockingbird, perception management, absolutely. Operation Mockingbird, these are all, intelligence agencies, use of the press, absolutely. But I'm only, but for me, beyond Mockingbird, beyond all of the historical revelations about intelligence agency or Operation Sock Puppet with the Pentagon and social media, beyond all of that, which is fascinating, and we need more discussion of. The point I want us to get at is that, as Levine is pointing out, the entire apparatus was set up to stop counterinsurgency movements here and abroad. So the same tactics developed to put down rebellions in colonized parts of of Central South America and the continent of Africa were brought home and applied to Black and brown populations here in the United States. Same thing with COINTELPRO. But the media apparatus, I'm just saying, was set up to be a COINTELPRO, so to speak. The same logic. Put everybody under surveillance. Like one of the things Levine points out, all these movies about Vietnam and all this stuff about napalm, as bad as that was, I didn't know that they dropped, hundreds and thousands of like little sensors in the jungle to catch sounds and even track urine of people so that they could try to trace the movements of people in the jungle and the potential for counters. I mean, that was what they were trying. So in terms of, and they said we want to network computers so that we can envelop the entire world in a surveillance bubble so that we can manage and suppress counterinsurgency movements. And why? Because if you're going to continue to exploit and extract from and be violent toward all of these different populations here and abroad, and you have no intention of stopping, then the only other thing you can do is monitor them, surveil them, and offer up enough propaganda to hopefully blunt their revolutionary activity. Yeah, it really is. And by the way, this isn't me. This is what they had said. They said to use words like propaganda initially, and then public relations and mass comm and advertising and marketing to walk us away from what they knew they were doing, which was psychological warfare, psyops, all of that. That's what they are intending to do. So we just have to catch up to the fact that all the words we use all the time, again, branding, advertising, marketing, these are all of them are about psychological warfare. The process is the same, the goals are the same, etc. So, all right, it looks like I've gone through most of the comments and questions. I hope I didn't miss any. Apologies if I did, but I wanted to go ahead and wrap up here. And hopefully those who joined me here live enjoyed it. I really appreciate it. And hopefully those who check this out later, get as much from it as well or more. And as always, please be in touch. Feel free to, let me know what you think. Of course, we encourage you to
put it in the comments.
And make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Hit that like button. Not quite as many likes as viewers right now. Please join the channel if you can. Again, the myth and propaganda of Black buying power. You can get that for free at imixwhatilike.org. Get your digital copy. And again, put it to good use. And then come on back to the channel in about 30 minutes for our conversation with Frank Chapman about his new book on Black liberation and socialism. Looking forward to that very much. We're going to be right back here in about 30 minutes for that at Black Power Media. And so definitely do that. Again, thanks to everybody for checking this out. And whether you're again here live now or you're checking this out later, we really appreciate it. Definitely
put it in the comments.
If you got something to say, we want to hear about it. And again, we'll be back here in about 30 minutes. And definitely check out all the other good work happening at Black Power Media and beyond. So again, I'm Jared Ball. This has been another edition of I Mix What I Like Live. Thanks again for joining me. And as Fred Hampton used to say, to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Catch you next time. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.